Throughout the time that I've been building the Five Nights at Freddy's games in Minecraft, I've mostly stuck to the original pre-rendered titles where the gameplay is mostly the same every time. I would be sitting in an office watching multiple cameras, while the animatronics could only move through set positions around the pizzeria. Now, while that classic styled gameplay is fun to recreate and play through, in this video I want to challenge myself to create a more complex game mechanic, with the focus being on having free roaming animatronics all in vanilla Minecraft. This is something that I've never done before, as the only FNAF game to have complete free roam around the building is Security Breach. And while I have already built the entire Pizzaplex and some hints of gameplay, at the time I didn't know enough about command blocks to be able to recreate something as complex as the Glamrock animatronics. However, now that I've built over 10 different FNAF games and just finished building the ruined Pizzaplex, this is the perfect way to start adding in working gameplay into that map by having the animatronics roam around the different attractions. So without any more further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Before I begin, I first need to find a good place to have a free roaming animatronic, as even though I'm intending this for the Ruin map, I don't think that this version of the Pizzaplex has enough open areas for us to start with. So instead, I'm going to be using my original Pizzaplex map and have the first animatronic be one of the original Glamrocks. And since I'm doing this inside the atrium, I think it'll be fitting to recreate Monty for this first example, since he roams around this area during the 2 AM showtime sequence. So to get started, we obviously need the animatronic itself. Now, while I could use mods, data packs, or display entities to make this easier, I personally prefer using armor stands to keep the Minecraft style to the game. This is of course up to personal preference, but this is how I will be making the animatronic models from here on out. So now that Monty's been added, you can now see where I've used different armor stands to recreate the different features of Monty. But now that the model is done, I have two options on how I can continue, where I can either make Monty work by creating my own animatronic AI from scratch, or I can use something that's already in Minecraft and make my life a lot easier. And I'm going to be doing a mix of both, but starting with what's already in the game with this zombie here. So while the Monty model is what the animatronic looks like, this zombie is what Monty is going to act like. And by that I don't mean that all Monty is going to be able to do is roam around like a normal zombie, but by using some command blocks I can change the zombie's pathfinding to work in a similar way to how Monty does in Security Breach. Before getting started on any pathfinding though, I think the first thing to do should be to apply the Monty model to the zombie, that way we actually have Monty roaming around and not just a normal zombie. So to do that, I'm going to have to give an entity tag to this zombie, that way the command blocks are going to know which zombie in particular I'm talking about. So to do that, we're going to type in the command data merge entity @e type equals zombie. That way we are changing the data of this single zombie here. And since we're giving it a tag, we're going to type in tags. Then we're going to go ahead and type in what we want the tag to be. So for this example, since this is going to be the zombie for the Monty armor stand, I'm just going to call this Monty Z, where the Z is short for zombie. So if I go ahead and type that in chat, that zombie now has the tag Monty Z applied to it. So with the zombie now tagged, we can now go ahead and add in our first command into this command block here. So I'm going to type in execute @e tag equals Monty Z, since that is what we tagged the zombie. And we're going to run a TP command to teleport the Monty armor stand to the zombie. Now there are multiple armor stands, so there's going to have to be multiple command blocks. However, let's start out with the first armor stand called Monty Body 1. And we're going to teleport that armor stand to the exact coordinates of the zombie. So if I go ahead and click done, then power this command block, you can now see that the Monty armor stand has teleported to the zombie. Now there is a bit of a problem here, and that's that the armor stand is not facing in the same direction as the zombie. So what I'm going to have to do is set up an extra teleport command, so that way the armor stand is facing the same direction as the zombie, and to do that we're going to need a few more armor stand positioned around the zombie. So to fix this, I'm going to be using an armor stand with the tag Monty look forward, which is constantly going to be teleported in front of wherever the zombie is looking, and I'm going to set up the Monty armor stand to face towards wherever the armor stand is. So in a second command block, I'm going to type execute @e tag equals Monty Z, since we're once again executing this command at the Monty zombie, and we're going to run a TP command to teleport the armor stand I just summoned in front of the zombie. So that entity's tag is Monty look F. And what I'm going to do is teleport it exactly 1 block in front of wherever the zombie is looking. So if I go ahead and power that command, you can now see that the armor stand is exactly 1 block in front of wherever the zombie is. Now it isn't directional based on wherever the zombie is looking, but rather where it's going towards. As you can see right now, when it went towards the right, the armor stand also teleported to the right along with it. Now this is actually fine, as when the zombie is standing still, we can give Monty an idle animation, meaning the armor stands aren't going to be rotated around when the zombie is looking around. So now back in the first command block, I'm now going to finish this command by writing facing entity @e tag equals Monty look forward. So that way, when I go ahead and activate this command now, the Monty armor stand is now going to be facing the new armor stand that we just summoned. But now you can see that when the zombie moves, the Monty armor stand is going to face towards the same direction that the zombie is moving towards. So now all I need to do is the exact same thing for every other armor stand. However, this could be a bit tricky, as not all of the armor stands are facing towards the direction that the zombie is facing. So there's going to have to be multiple of these positioned armor stands all around the zombie. That way the different armor stands can be facing in the right direction. And now with all of the Monty armor stands applied to the zombie, you can now see the absolute mess of armor stands that are surrounding the model. Now luckily none of these actually need to be visible, so if I go ahead and turn them all off, you can now see what Monty is going to look like without any of the armor stands surrounding him. However, if I go ahead and set my game mode to survival, you can see that the zombie is still going to act like a normal zombie and try to chase me, except this time instead of it looking like a zombie is after me, it looks like Monty is chasing me instead. So the next thing we can do is set up a proper animation for it, that way he's not just sliding on the floor, and is going to act a lot more like how Monty would in-game. Now animating armor stands is actually quite tricky, as what I need to do is manually change each one of the armor stand's limbs rotation values, that way it looks like it's changing its position every time a command block powers. You can see inside of each one of these command blocks here, there's a bunch of numbers for each limb of the armor stand, and each one of these values here represents the rotation value of each limb. So what I need to do for Monty is something similar to this, however I want to make it in a way that it's not just skipping from one frame to another, that way it looks like there's a smooth transition between the two positions. So starting with something simple, I've gone ahead and set up a quick animation cycle for Monty's legs, where these two command blocks here are swapping between the two different armor stand positions, making it look like Monty is actually walking. However, like I just mentioned, I want to make it so that it doesn't look like the animatronic is moving in stop motion, and is instead going to have a more fluid animation. Now this is going to involve quite a few more command blocks for each frame, however I do think it will be worth it to make it look a lot more realistic. And here are all of the command blocks needed to get the full walking cycle to work. Now it looks like there's a lot of command blocks here, however it is just cycling through the same 7 command blocks over and over, that way it actually makes it look like Monty is walking. So if I go ahead and turn myself back into survival, you can see that when Monty starts chasing me again, it actually looks like Monty is walking towards me instead of just sliding on the floor. Now there is something that we need to change to this, and that's to make the animation stop playing when Monty stops moving, that way his legs aren't always moving even when Monty is standing in place. So to get this to work, I need to set up a detection system that sees if the zombie is moving around or if it's standing still. So you can see at the side of the screen that I've added a scoreboard to the world called Monty Walk, and this is going to be what checks to see if the zombie is moving or not. So the system works with these two command blocks here, where this first one is going to run an execute command at the position of the Monty zombie, and is going to check its NBT data to see if the zombie is standing still. If the zombie isn't moving, then it's going to set the scoreboard Monty Walk to 0. However, if the zombie starts moving, then the second command block is going to do the opposite thing, where it checks to see if the zombie isn't standing still. So if the zombie is moving, then it's going to increase the scoreboard Monty Walk by 1 every time the zombie starts to move. So if I go ahead and activate this system here, you can see that when Monty starts to move, that scoreboard starts to increase. However, when it stops moving, that scoreboard gets set back to 0 again. And that's exactly how we're going to get the animation to stop playing if the zombie is standing still. So inside of all of these animation command blocks, I've set up an execute command to only let the command block send an output if the scoreboard Monty Walk matches 1 or higher. So now if we go ahead and take a look at Monty again, you can see that when the zombie is standing still, the animation is no longer playing, but the moment the zombie starts moving again, the animation plays again to make it look like Monty is actually walking. So now that Monty has a walking animation, I can now finally go ahead and get started working on a proper movement cycle for Monty to go through. Now like I mentioned, I'm going to be recreating the movement path from the 2 AM showtime sequence, which is when Monty roams around this side of the atrium. And you can already see that I've marked down each of the different positions that Monty is going to go to, so what I need to do is set up the zombie to go from one corner to the other. However, instead of instantly going to each one, I want for the zombie to take short breaks in between each corner, that way Monty can play a quick idle animation before then going to the opposite corner and the cycle continues over and over. Now usually when it comes to moving an animatronic along a set path, I would normally use an execute command that teleports an armor stand if it's standing on top of a certain type of block. However, since Monty is able to freely roam around the building and isn't just stuck to a set path, I'm not able to use the same technique that I've used in some of my other FNAF maps. So instead, I'm going to be doing something I've never done before and have a wandering trader walk to each of the different positions. I recently found out that you can manually change a wandering trader's wander target, which means I can manually make it go to a certain set of coordinates. So all of these command blocks rows up here represents a specific position around the atrium, where by powering one, you can see that the wandering trader is going to walk towards that exact position. So this works by using the wander target technique, where by modifying the data of the wandering trader, I can force it to go towards a specific X coordinate. The command block on top of it is for the Y coordinate, and finally the third command block is for the Z coordinate. So this is exactly how we're going to get Monty to go from one position to the next, by having the wandering trader go to each of the different positions. However, this unfortunately only works for wandering traders and not zombies. So this means I'm going to have to make a system that replaces the zombie with a wandering trader whenever I want it to walk around the atrium. And this here is the system that gets that to work, which all revolves around a scoreboard called Monty Aggro. So this side on the right is what changes the zombie into a wandering trader, and the opposite side changes the wandering trader into a zombie. So it starts with this repeating command block here, which is looking for what the value of the scoreboard is set to, and if it activates, it's then going to power this command block here and summons a zombie 5 blocks underneath the wandering trader. Now at the same time, it's also going to remove the AI of the wandering trader, that way when the zombie spawns in, the wandering trader isn't going to see it and start to run around the room uncontrollably. So once the wandering trader's AI has been removed, it's then going to teleport the zombie to the exact coordinates of the wandering trader, and then it's going to change the data of the wandering trader to have a different tag. Now at the same time, it's then going to replace the tag of the wandering trader and give it to the zombie, that way the zombie now has the tag Monty Z. And this is because every time a new mob is spawned in, it's going to have the tag Monty Z. Now I know this was originally just for the zombie, however since the armor stands are teleporting to the entity with the tag Monty Z, I need the wandering trader and the zombie to have the tags Monty Z. However, every time I spawn in a new mob, I need to remove the tag of the previous mob, that way the new mob that spawns in now has control over Monty. Then to finish up with this last command block, it's then going to teleport the wandering trader out of the map, that way the zombie gets complete control over Monty. So if I go ahead and increase the scoreboard for this, the wandering trader has now been replaced with a zombie and is now going to roam around freely like a normal zombie. And the exact same thing is going to happen on the opposite side when the zombie becomes a wandering trader. Now the reason why there's a longer delay in between this happening is because both mobs are spawning in invisible, and wandering traders don't like being invisible, meaning they're going to hold a milk bucket to get rid of their potion effect. So since we don't want to see a floating bucket in front of Monty, the wandering trader is going to stay underneath the map for a longer amount of time before then getting teleported up to the zombie and becoming the new Monty. That really is the small downside to this system, is that it only works during the night, as if I go ahead and set the time to day, you can see that the wandering trader is trying to get rid of its potion effect by holding a milk bucket. So the time does have to be set to night to get this to work, that way the wandering trader is invisible and we don't see any effect around it. However, the system still works completely fine, as if I go ahead and make the wandering trader go to a set coordinate, it actually looks like Monty is walking around. So with that now figured out, I've now gone ahead and made the system automatic, where now you can see the wandering trader is going from one position to the next all by itself. Now it may look like I've added quite a few command blocks since then, however these are all still the same commands from earlier, I've just made the system run on its own. So you can see at the side of the screen that I've added a new scoreboard called Monty Position, and this is what determines which position Monty is moving to next. So you can see when Monty makes it to that corner, the scoreboard is going to increase by 1, which is then going to let these command blocks know which position to move the Wandering Trader to. Now something you'll notice is that in each of the 4 main corners is an armor stand, and this is what determines when Monty is going to stop moving to play his idle animation. Right now he's just going to keep on going from position to position, however every time he makes it to one of the 4 different corners, he needs to stop for a brief moment. So every time he gets close enough to one of the armor stands, we're going to remove the Wandering Trader's AI for a brief moment, that way Monty can play an idle animation before then continuing to the next part of the cycle. And here is what the full system looks like now that Monty's movement cycle has been fully finished, where most of the added command blocks are in this small setup right here. So you can see at the side of the screen I've added a new scoreboard called Monty Position Timer, and this is the countdown for how long Monty is going to have his AI removed for. So when Monty makes it within range of one of those armor stands, the countdown is then going to start, but at the same time his AI is going to be removed to stop the Wandering Trader from moving to the next position. Now once that countdown ends, it's then going to reset for the next time he makes it to the corner, and the Wandering Trader is then going to get its AI back again to make it move to the next position. Now just to make sure that the walking animation stops when the Wandering Trader's AI is removed, these 2 command blocks here are going to force the animation to stop playing, just to make sure that Monty isn't going to walk even when Monty's AI has been removed. Now the best part about this is while Monty is a Wandering Trader, he's just going to go about his movement cycle, but the moment I turn him into a zombie, he's going to start attacking me again. However, if I go ahead and turn him back into a Wandering Trader, the Wandering Trader is immediately going to go back to its movement cycle, and Monty is going to continue cycling around the atrium. So next what I need to do is make this an automatic system that's going to detect if I'm within the range of the Wandering Trader. And this system right here is what gets that to work, which starts by running an execute command at the position of the player. Now what this first part of the command is doing is checking to see if the player is within the eyesight of the Wandering Trader, however this is only going to send an output if the player is within 10 blocks of the Wandering Trader. And this is exactly how we're going to set up Monty's range, as this number right here is how far away we need to be for the Wandering Trader to be able to recognize that I'm within its eyesight. So right now it's set to 10 blocks, however what we can do in the future is change it so that way Monty is going to see us from a further distance. After that, the next part of the command is checking to see that the player is actually in front of the Wandering Trader, as if we're behind Monty, we don't want Monty to see us since he's not looking at us and we're not in his line of sight. So now if I go ahead and activate the system here, you can see that when I'm in front of the Wandering Trader, the command block is going to power and say that we've been seen. However, if I go behind Monty, you can see that the opposite command block powers and says that we're not seen. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing to swap between the Wandering Trader and the zombie. So to finish the system, I'm now going to go ahead and add in the scoreboard command to increase the scoreboard Monty aggro every time we're within range of the Wandering Trader. So if the Wandering Trader sees us, the score is going to be set to 1, however if we go out of the line of sight, that score is going to be set to 0, and Monty is going to stay as a Wandering Trader. However, in Security Breach, the way the animatronics see us isn't only if we're within their line of sight, but also if we're within a certain radius of the animatronic itself. So what I'm going to do now is set up another command block that's going to see if the player is within range of the Monty armor stand. So for this I'm going to type execute at @e tag equals Monty Z. That way we are running this command at the position of the Monty zombie, and we are going to run another execute command if the entity player is within a certain range of the armor stand. So we're going to do if entity type equals player is within a distance of, let's say, 5 blocks. So right now, if the player is within 5 blocks of the Monty Z entity, this command block is then going to send an output. So if I go ahead and connect that to the same command that's going to set the scoreboard to 1, now if we are within range of the Monty armor stand in front of him or not, the command block is going to power and turn Monty into a zombie. So to test this out, right now Monty is roaming around as a Wandering Trader, but the moment I go within 5 blocks of him, he's immediately going to turn into a zombie and start chasing me again. Now what I need to do next is actually change the way that the zombie itself works, as right now there is no way to outrun Monty even though this area is a wide open space. So what I need to do is change the zombie's follow range, that way we're able to outrun Monty, lose his line of sight, that way the zombie can turn back into a Wandering Trader and start to go about his movement path again. Now the way that I do that is by using the attribute command, which is a command I've never used before, but is going to let me modify certain points of the zombie. So we're going to type in the tag Monty Z, and here you're going to be able to see the amount of options that we're going to change for the zombie. Now right now we are only going to focus on generic follow range. We're going to set the base to a certain value, and that is how many blocks away we need to be for the zombie to no longer be able to chase us. So for this example, I'm just going to go ahead and say 20 blocks, so we need to be within 20 blocks of the zombie for it to be able to recognize us and chase us. Next, I also need the system to know that if I am over 20 blocks away from the zombie needs to turn back into a wandering trader. So to do that, I'm once again going to be using the same execute command where if I'm within 5 blocks, but this time change it to be within over 20 blocks. So now if I am over 20 blocks away, this command block is going to send an output, which is then going to set the Monty aggro score to 0, turning the zombie back into a wandering trader. With that though, I also had to make a few changes to the system that swaps out between the zombie and the wandering trader, as since the system is now happening automatically, this system was powering a lot more often than it should have been. So what I needed to do was actually set up a way to remove the comparator once the zombie has been spawned in, that way there's not multiple of the same mob at the same time, all trying to become Monty at once. So once Monty becomes a certain mob, the comparator is then going to get removed from the system, that way it doesn't power a second time, but is then going to add the comparator back to the opposite side of the system, that way Monty can then turn back into a zombie or a wandering trader. And the reason why those command blocks are needed should become pretty obvious very quickly, as every time I leave Monty's line of sight, the system thinks that a new zombie needs to spawn in. However, since there's no limit to how many zombies can spawn anymore, the system is going to keep on spawning in a new zombie, and all of them are going to teleport to Monty at the same time, trying to become the new version of Monty. And you can see already how many zombies have just spawned in such a short amount of time, and there was even a point earlier on while I was trying to get the system to work, where there were hundreds of zombies spawning in at the same time, all teleporting around Monty, since all of them were trying to be Monty at the same time. So once again, if I go ahead and walk up to Monty, it's going to turn into a zombie and start chasing me, but now if I run at least over 20 blocks away from the zombie is going to completely lose sight of me, turn back into a wandering trader, and go back to the way it was before it started chasing me. Now obviously running away from Monty in Security Breach is nowhere as easy as the example that I just showed off, so what I've gone ahead and done is increased all of the values, that way Monty can see us from further away as well as chase us from a further distance. Now what I also want to do is increase his movement speed when he does see us, that way if he's chasing us he's actually going to be running and not just walking at normal movement speed. And this isn't going to be complicated to set up at all, as all we need is a simple execute command if the score from the player Monty aggro matches 1. This is the scoreboard that's going to be set to 1 if Monty sees us. So since we want to give him a speed effect, we're going to run an effect command. We're going to give it to Monty Z, so tag equals Monty Z, and we're going to give it a speed effect, make it infinite, and then we're going to go ahead and set it to 1, make it true, that way we don't see any potion effects surrounding the zombie. So when Monty sees us, he's going to be given an infinite speed effect with a value of 1. And that is all that is needed for this command block, so if Monty now sees us, he's going to have that speed effect applied and is going to run towards us a lot faster. But now we want the opposite thing to happen if Monty doesn't see us, where the effect gets removed and he goes back to his normal movement speed. So we're going to take the exact same command block and we're just going to edit it a little bit, that way the effect gets removed. So if the score matches 0, we want to effect clear the zombie from speed effect, that way he's no longer going to be running at that speed. So going to effect clear at E tag equals Monty Z again, except instead of clearing all effects from the zombie, we just want to clear the speed effect, as remember the zombie still has an invisibility effect and we still want that to be on the zombie regardless of what happens. So we are just simply going to remove the speed effect, that way when the zombie doesn't see us anymore, it's going to go back to walking at normal movement speed. And that is everything needed to get the system to work, so once Monty is roaming around the atrium as a wandering trader, he's going to be walking at that movement speed. However, if I go ahead and set myself to survival again and the zombie sees us, you're going to notice that he's going to be a lot faster, making it a bit more difficult to run away from Monty. So now that Monty's full movement path has now been added, I've now gone ahead and added in the idle animation that I've been talking about throughout this entire video. You're going to notice that there's going to be some slight head animations where he looks from left to right, before then going back on the movement path and does the same thing in every single corner. So this now wraps up everything to do with Monty's main mechanic, leaving the jump scare as the last thing that needs adding before we're completely finished with the animatronic. So to get started on the jump scare itself, it actually uses a command block that we've already used already, which is an execute command positioned at the Monty Z entity, which is checking to see if the player is within a certain range of the entity. So for this example, since we want to get jump scared if Monty catches us, this command block is checking to see if the player is at a distance of 1.3 blocks or less. If we are, then this command block is then going to send an output, which is then going to power the rest of the commands for the jump scare. Now the first command we're going to set up is going to remove the zombie's AI, as if we get jump scared by Monty, I don't want the zombie to still be attacking us, so we're going to remove its AI, that way we're able to do a lot more with the jump scare. So the first command we're going to add is a data command. We're going to merge the entity @e tag equals Monty Z, and we're going to go ahead and set that to limit 1, that way it actually knows which one we're talking about. And we're going to remove its AI, which is going to use no AI, turn that to 1B. So now when this command block powers, it's going to remove the zombie's AI, that way it's no longer going to look around or move around like a normal zombie. Next, we want to force the player to look towards Monty while the jump scare is happening. So what we're going to do is use a TP command. However, since I want to teleport the player directly in front of Monty, we're once again going to need to start out with an execute command. So execute @e tag equals Monty Z, and we're going to run a TP command and teleport the player in front of Monty. So teleport @e type equals player, and we're going to teleport us exactly 1 block in front of Monty. Now, since I want to force us to be able to look at Monty during the jump scare, I'm going to add facing entity @e tag equals Monty Z. That way, while the jump scare is playing, we're not able to look around freely and we're forced to look towards Monty. Now, usually when it comes to teleporting a player relative to another entity's position, we need to set up a levitation effect, as what's going to happen is the player is going to get teleported in front of the entity, but there's a chance that sometimes the player isn't going to be standing on the ground and is going to try fall back down. So to fix this, we're going to set up a levitation effect. So we're going to type effect give @e type equals player. We're going to give us a levitation effect, make it infinite, and then we're going to set it to 255. That way it's the maximum levitation effect. Set it to true, that way we don't see any potion effects. And that should now be everything needed for the start of the jump scare. So these 2 command blocks here are set to chain and always active. That way when this command block sends an output, all 3 of these command blocks are going to power at the same time. So one more time, if I go ahead and walk within Monty's line of sight, you can now see that when he catches me, I'm no longer able to look around or move around, and I'm stuck looking towards Monty. So what I need to do next is actually set up a proper jump scare animation for the armor stands, that way it actually looks like he's jump scaring us, and then set up a game over screen, that way I'm not stuck looking at Monty forever. So just like the walking and idle animation, the way that we animate an armor stand is by individually changing the rotation values of each limb. However, instead of using a repeater to activate all of these command blocks in order, I'm going to be using a scoreboard countdown to power it instead. Now, I have already used a scoreboard timer in this video for Monty to walk around the atrium, however, I'm going to go ahead and show off how it works for this system as well. So you can see I have a scoreboard setup called Monty Jump, and this is how long the jump scare animation is going to last for. So in this first command block here is an execute command checking to see when the score matches 80 or less. If it does, then it's going to remove 1 score from that scoreboard, essentially making an infinite countdown, since every time the number matches less than 80, it's going to constantly remove 1 from that number. So that's where the second command block comes in, which is checking to see when the score matches 0 or less, which is then going to set the score to 100, and since that's a bigger number than 80, it's going to stop the timer from counting down completely. So if I go ahead and activate it, you can see that the scoreboard is counting down, but the moment it reaches 0, it's going to reset to 100 and stop completely. And that's how all of these animation commands are going to power, as inside of each one is an execute command which is going to let the command block power when the scoreboard matches a certain number. So if I go ahead and show this off while looking at Monty, you can now see how when the scoreboard counts down, it's then going to animate the different parts of the jump scare. Now before the countdown resets, this command block is going to send an output when the scoreboard matches a number between 0 and 18. Now what this is going to do is activate the game over sequence, where this command block is going to teleport us out of the room, before then having the text appear on screen to indicate that we've lost the game. And that now completely wraps up everything to do with Monty's jump scare, which also just so happens to complete every mechanic to do with Monty himself. And that now completely wraps up every mechanic to do with Monty. So as one last feature, what I've gone ahead and done is added in some sound effects. That way he's going to make noise when he's chasing us, when he sees us, and then of course during the jump scare. So let's go ahead and show this off. So once again, if I get close to Monty, he's going to see us. You can hear that we get the court sound, and let's go ahead and get jump scared, where you can see we get the animation, and then of course we get taken to the game over screen. Then of course we're also able to run away from Monty, so if I go ahead and get caught by him one more time, all I have to do is run at least least 30 blocks away from him to get out of his line of sight, and that's then going to cause him to go back to his normal movement cycle around the atrium. So I'm just going to run all the way to the opposite side of the room, and eventually we're going to see that Monty is going to lose sight of me, is going to stop running, and is then going to go back to his normal route around the room. And just like in Security Breach, if we want to get past Monty without him seeing us, all we have to do is stay out of his line of sight and stay away from him, and then we'll be able to sneak past and go to wherever we need to go to next. But now with just over 260 total command blocks, Monty's 2 AM showtime sequence has now been fully added. Now of course, if we did want to have more movement paths in other parts of the Pizzaplex, we would have to do the same thing again in every other area. However, for the time being, this is everything I wanted to do for Monty, which was really just to show off how an animatronic like this would be able to work in Minecraft. So now that I finished with the example, it's finally time to head over to the ruined Pizzaplex and start to add working gameplay into it by recreating one of the ruined animatronics. Unlike in the base game, all of the animatronic encounters in Ruin are set up for scripted sequences, which will help make things a lot easier to recreate. And I think that the best place to start adding working gameplay to first is the Roxy encounter in the Roxy Raceway, as not only does it include the animatronic itself, but it also includes an important gameplay mechanic. Since Roxy isn't able to see anymore, we have to lure her away from us by using different camera stations, which is also how we're able to unlock new parts of the area and continue to the opposite side of the raceway. So since Roxy isn't going to be actively after me like Monty was, I don't need to worry about setting up a system that changes the Wandering Trader into a zombie like how I had to do with Monty. Now speaking of Wandering Traders, I've already gone ahead and connected one to the Roxy model, that way it's already able to walk around on its own. With that being said though, Roxy does have her own set movement path around these 4 corners of the room, so next what I need to do is set up the Wandering Trader to follow the exact same movement path, just like how I made Monty work in the atrium. Unlike Monty, however, Roxy isn't guaranteed to go in a set circle and actually has a 50-50 chance of going one way or the other. And this system right here is what gets that to work properly, where these command block rows in the back are actually what take the Wandering Trader to those set of coordinates. So once Roxy makes it to one of the 4 different corners, one of these command blocks here is going to activate, which is then going to start a randomizer to roll a number between 1 and 2. Now depending which number that lands on will determine which way Roxy is going to move to next. So right now we can see she's at the top right corner, and the randomizer is going to roll a 1, meaning Roxy is going to go to the top left corner. Now at the same time, there is also a scoreboard countdown that's going on, which is how long Roxy is going to stay in that position once she's moved to a set corner. So once that countdown ends, it's then going to activate one of these command blocks here, which is then actually going to take the Wandering Trader to one of the 4 different corners. And this cycle is going to keep on repeating over and over until we use the camera audio lure, which is when her movement path is then going to get overridden. Now when we do use the cameras, we're only able to lure Roxy from one corner to the other, meaning we're going to have to gradually lure her across the room until she makes it through the fence gates, and we're then able to continue to the next part of the raceway. So to get started, I've gone ahead and marked down where each of the different camera positions are set to, that way we actually know where we're going to be when we use the cameras. Now where the camera model is actually set to in game is different from where we actually view it from, so for example, usually there's a camera on top of this pole in Ruin, however when we view that camera, we're standing in a position that's more like where I'm at right now. So to get started, what I need to do is actually set up a system to let us open the cameras, that way we're able to access them in the first place. First of all, this is what the camera stations themselves look like, which are already scattered all around the map since I built them as I was making the Pizzaplex. So the way I want these to work is we walk up to one and then crouch, and it's then going to teleport us to one of the camera positions, and then we'll be given all of the items needed to cycle between the different ones. So the way we do that is by using a scoreboard command, which is going to detect for whenever we're crouching. So to do that, I'm going to add a new objective and call it camera crouch, and now this is going to require a custom scoreboard, so I'm going to type Minecraft custom Minecraft sneak time, and this is going to detect whenever I'm sneaking. So if I go ahead and hit enter and then put it at the sidebar, so objectives, set display, sidebar, camera crouch, you can now see whenever I crouch, that scoreboard is going to keep on increasing and then stops increasing whenever I stand back up like normal. Next, I actually want to make sure that the player is standing in front of the camera stations when they are crouching, that way the command block is going to send an output if needed. So to do that, we're going to use an execute command and position it at the coordinates in front of the camera stations. So positioned, take in those coordinates if the entity of the player is standing within, let's say, 0.5 blocks of that position. So distance 0.5, and that is then going to send an output if we are doing that. So let's go ahead and copy this command and now put it inside a command block, and now let's type in the second half of the command that's going to detect when we're crouching. So what I'm going to do now is type run execute if score at p, and we're going to take the cam crouch if it is matching more than 1, which is going to happen whenever I start crouching. So now if we are within 0.5 blocks of these coordinates and we're crouching, this command block is now going to send an output and teleport us to the first camera position. So now if I walk up to the camera station and then crouch, you can see that I'm instantly taken to camera 1, and I've also been given some items in my inventory. Now the way I like to make my camera systems is by throwing items in the inventory, so if I throw one of these camera items, it's then going to teleport us to that position, and it's then going to replace the black camera item with a white one, that way we know which camera we're currently looking at. Now there's also an orange item in my inventory labeled exit, and this is the item we're going to throw when we want to leave the cameras. So next what I need to do is actually set up the teleport commands to take us to the different camera positions when I throw one of these items, that way we're able to cycle between the different cameras. Now the camera systems in Ruin aren't as complicated as some of the other FNAF games, so this system here isn't going to be as complex as some of my other FNAF maps. Now it starts with this repeating command block here, checking to see if the player has the item cam_1 in their inventory, and if they do, this repeating command block is going to constantly teleport us to the camera 1 position. The same thing happens for every other camera, where if we have the camera item for camera 2, it's going to teleport us to the camera position for camera 2. Now let's say we're looking at a different camera and we want to select camera 1 again. So this repeating command block here is checking to see if the player doesn't have the item labeled cam 1, and if we don't, it's then going to activate this chain of command blocks here to give us all of the items needed if we were looking at camera 1. Now all of these commands here are replacing the items in my inventory with the items from inside of this chest. So you can see there is the exit item at the very start of the inventory, and each one of these items here is going to be given to the player depending which camera they're currently looking at. So for example, if we're looking at camera 1, we're going to have the white camera item for cam 1, and the rest of the items in my inventory are going to be the black camera items to indicate that we're not currently looking at that camera. And this is also how we're able to exit the cameras, is if I don't have the player head labeled exit in my inventory, it's then going to clear all of the items in my inventory completely, and then it's going to get rid of the slowness effect that I've set up while we're looking at the cameras. Then finally, this last command block here is going to teleport us back in front of the camera station again, that way we're able to look at the cameras again whenever we want. So to show this off properly, if I go ahead and activate the cameras and then throw a different camera item, you can see that I'm going to be teleported to that new camera position. Now if I want to go ahead and exit the camera, all I have to do is throw the exit item, and I'm then teleported back in front of the camera station again. So next what I need to do is actually set up the audio lure itself, that way I'm able to move Roxy from camera to camera. And the way this is going to work is by throwing the camera item for the one we currently have selected. So starting with an execute command positioned at the coordinates of the camera 1 position, it's going to check to see if the player is standing within 0.1 blocks of those coordinates. If they are, then it's then going to run the second half of the command block, which is checking to see if we've thrown the item for camera 1 from our inventory. If we have, it's then going to send an output, which is then first going to give us back the camera 1 item, that way we can use it again, and is then going to set the scoreboard Roxy lure to 1. This is the scoreboard I'm going to be using to determine if I've used the audio lure or not. So let's say I'm positioned at camera 1 and I use the lure, it's then going to check to see that Roxanne is in one of the 2 nearest corners that's closest to camera 1, and if she is, these command blocks are going to send an output, which is then going to move Roxanne back to the position that's closest to camera 1. So right now we can see that Roxy is currently at the position closest to camera 2, so if I go ahead and throw the item for camera 1, she's now going to get lured to the position closest to camera 1. The same thing is going to happen if I throw the camera item for camera 2, where now she's going to be lured to the position closest to camera 2. Now let's say we were to use a camera on the opposite side of the room like camera 4, if I were to throw this item, Roxy is not going to get affected by it since it's way out of her line of sight and she isn't going to be affected by the audio lure. Now to make sure Roxy doesn't move on her own when the audio lure is being used, I've gone ahead and set up execute commands at the start of all of these command blocks to stop them from powering if the score Roxy lure matches 1. Now once Roxy does make it to one of the corners, this command block is then going to detect it and is then going to set the score back to 0 to let Roxy move on her own again. And now here is the entire system fully completed, where now Roxy is able to be lured to every single camera position. Now to finish things up, I've gone ahead and added this small system right here to let Roxy break through the fences once she's made it to the final camera position. So if this command block detects that she's 1.3 blocks away from the doorway, this command block is then going to remove the fences. That way the Wandering Trader is going to be able to walk through them and continue on to the next area. This means that Roxy is no longer going to be walking through this area, meaning we'll be able to walk through it without getting jump scared, and we don't have to worry about Roxy again until we meet her again later on. So with the main mechanic now fully finished, I've gone ahead and added in some final details like a proper animation, some sound effects, and of course the jump scare itself. So just like with Monty, if we get too close to Roxy, it's then going to activate the jump scare and we then get taken to the game over screen. I've also added in some proper lighting to the build, that way it looks a lot more accurate to how it does in Ruin, where everything is a lot darker and I don't have to keep on using a night vision effect. Now if I go ahead and use the camera system, you can see that right in front of the camera station itself is an armor stand model of Cassie, and these are going to appear every time I use the cameras, so that way we can view ourselves when we're looking through them. Now as one last detail to the cameras, you're going to notice that when I use the audio lure, it's going to put one of Gregory's voice lines in the chat, so that way Roxy is actually lured to the sound of Gregory's voice. Now obviously I'm not able to put the actual sound effects from Ruin in this Minecraft map, so every time I use the camera audio lure, it's going to put one of Gregory's voice lines in the chat. Now one more detail that I think is worth bringing up is the fact that this isn't the only version of the build that we're able to access in Ruin. As you all know, every area in the Pizzaplex has an AR version, and as I was building the Pizzaplex, I made sure to add in that version of the build as I was building everything. So just like before, if I go ahead and put this Vanny Mask player head on, it's now going to take us to the AR version of the build. And as you can see right here, I've also gone ahead and added the AR version of Roxy, who is going to do the exact same thing as the normal Roxy does in the normal world. Now these are two completely different entities, as originally I was going to try and make them both the same one where Roxy just teleports down to the build below, however it ended up being a lot easier just to make an entire separate one, and this is going to appear in the same position that the normal Roxy is in. Now since this version of Roxy doesn't have its own separate jump scare, if I get too close to it, it's going to remove my mask so that way I teleport back up to the normal world and the exact same jump scare is going to play out. And that now finishes everything to do with the first Roxy encounter. So what I'm going to do next is the exact same thing over for the second encounter, that way the entire gameplay for the first part of the Roxy Raceway can be fully completed. Now this is going to be very similar to what I've just done, so I'm not going to go ahead and explain everything and how it all works a second time. However, there are a few differences in between the two, so I'm going to go over those differences as I do think there are a few details in this section that make it a lot more interesting. So now here are the 800 total command blocks that make up both the first and second encounters in the Roxy Raceway. Now while the first encounter all took place in the normal world, the second encounter all takes place in the AR dimension. And what I mean by that is that we're not able to access the camera station unless we're wearing the Vanny Mask. So you can see if I go ahead and crouch in front of the second camera station here, it's not going to let me access the cameras. So to do that, I'm actually going to have to put the Vanny Mask on and then crouch in front of the camera station, and then we gain access to all of the different cameras. Now after that, the system works in the exact same way as before, where I'm able to lure Roxy to each of the different positions, and that's then going to lead her through this part of the raceway. Now instead of it just being the AR version that gets lured to each of these positions, the normal version of Roxy is also getting lured along with it. So if I go ahead and see that in the normal world, you can see that we just lured Roxy to this part of the area, and the normal version of Roxy is also traveling alongside it. And just like before, what we have to do is lure her towards the fence gates, that way she breaks through them and we're able to continue on to the next area. So as we can see, if we go ahead and lure her to this area here, she's going to break through the fence gates, and now we're able to close out of the cameras and continue on to the next area without having to worry about Roxy. But that now wraps up everything I wanted to do for this part of the Roxy Raceway and everything I wanted to do for this video. Now I know I did spend most of it going over a completely different animatronic that isn't even going to be a part of this map, however I did want to make sure I knew what I was doing before I got started, that way when I add gameplay into this world, I know what I'm doing and can make sure it works the way I want it to. Like I mentioned, this is my first time adding something like this into Minecraft, and since I plan on recreating most of, if not the entire gameplay from Ruin, hopefully this will give you the general idea of what I plan on doing with the rest of the project. So to wrap up this video, let's go ahead and check out everything all together now that the entire thing has been fully completed. So right now we can see Roxy is over at camera 2, so let's go ahead and lure her over to the opposite side of the room at camera 3. Now we are also able to check the other cameras as she's walking, that way we can make sure she is actually going where we want her to. So as we can see, she should be moving over to camera 3. So now all we need to do is lure her over to camera 4 at the other side of the fences. That way she's going to break through them and we're now able to continue on to the next part of the raceway. Now those fences are going to break in both the normal world and the AR one. So as you can see, the fences are obviously missing. However, if I go ahead and put the mask on, you can see that the fences are also gone here as well, just in case we want to travel through the AR dimension instead. Now, of course, if we were in Ruin, we would have to worry about mechs disappearing if we have the mask on for too long. However, for the time being, I just want to focus on the animatronics themselves. However, Mexus is something I do want to add in the near future. But let's go ahead and move on to the next part of the sequence. Let's go ahead and lure Roxy through this part of the build, where this time we have to be wearing the Vanny mask. Now, if we were to take the Vanny mask off, Roxy would still be in the same area she is in the AR world. However, we wouldn't be able to access the camera station itself, so eventually Roxy would make her way back all the way to the start of the area, and we'd have to lure her through the entire walkway again. So let's just go ahead and one step at a time move her through this part of the area, and one more time, and then she's going to break through the fences, and then we're completely done, and we can move on to the next sequence. So let's go ahead and lure her over through camera 5. She's going to break those fences, and now we are completely done. So we can go ahead, exit the cameras, take the mask off, and now we're able to walk on through without needing to worry about Roxy. Now eventually we will have to put the mask back on, as there are some objects just like this, where we have to put the mask on to walk on through them. However, you can notice that the fences are gone in both the AR world and the normal one again. That way we're able to continue on to the next gameplay sequence. So even though it may not look like I've done all that much in the grand scale of this project, this is still a pretty big step forward, as now that I know what I'm doing, I'm able to do the exact same thing over and over again in all 9 chapters of Ruin. Like I mentioned earlier, I would like to recreate the entirety of the gameplay in Minecraft, and there's still a lot more different gameplay mechanics and features to cover in future videos. I may work on some of the smaller sections in my own time, but there are a few more mechanics that I want to dedicate entire videos to, just like this one. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see what's next, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on, that way you don't miss the next time I upload. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will of course see you in my next video.